Namaste, good morning, everyone. My name is Arvind Swami. Happy Navratri to all of you. Today is the auspicious day of Durgashtami and a wonderful day to have this webinar. This webinar today is brought to you by Vishwa Hindu Parishad of America in association with Hindu University of America. VHPA was founded in 1970. It is the oldest Hindu organization in the United States, having just completed 52 years in the service of the Hindu American community. During these 52 years, VHPA has had many pivotal accomplishments to its credit, such as the founding of Support a Child program, Ekal Vidyalaya, Hindu Students Council, as well as Hindu University of America. I think this is something many people may not know, but VHPA of America is actually like the mother of HUA. It was originally founded by VHPA members. HUA was originally founded by VHPA members. As these initiatives have reached maturity, most of them have spun off into independent entities, and they are definitely having an impact on the Hindu American community as well as the world at large. And today we'll be discussing and we'll be celebrating the Hindu Heritage Month, and this is our first session. Yesterday there was the inaugural session with Mananiya Dattatreya Bholeji, who joined us from Bharat. And today is the first webinar in this series to celebrate this month, and the session is titled Hindu Temples and Their Future in America. We have a fabulous young panel joining us today, and they will be introduced and the discussion will be facilitated by our Hindu Vishwanathanji. Hinduji is the Director of Hindu Education here at Hindu University of America, and she is also a very popular person known for her work in the field of Hinduphobia and increasing awareness about Hinduphobia and educating us on how to handle Hinduphobia. So with that, I'll hand it over to Hindu Vishwanathanji.
Namaste. Thank you, Arvindji, for that kind introduction. Namaskaram and happy Navaratri. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Enlivening Hindu Heritage, a new conference series that's launching as a part of Hindu Heritage Month, which is only in its second year and has already become so popular. Although the majority of Hindus living in the United States today would think of themselves as immigrants, they immigrated here. Hindus have lived here for generations, and there are remarkable layers of Hindu American life and perspectives among second and third generation Hindu Americans. I myself am a second gen, raising third gen. Traditional Hindu institutions in the United States recognize that the vibrancy of Hinduism in America moving forward depends on the increased involvement, agency, and voice of these diaspora-raised Hindus in our institutions and in our community. Simultaneously, diaspora-raised Hindus would like to see our institutions and community better reflect our perspectives and our vision for our community. So this conference seeks to bridge this gap. This is really the inspiration behind this conference series. This year's conference will center the voices of diaspora-raised Hindus and the ways in which we enliven Hinduism and Hindu perspectives in our personal and professional lives. And as an aside, I just want to add, while I'm flattered to be called a young person, we are second and third gen in that some of us are parents, some of us are nearing grandparent age. So we're not all college students just because we have American accents. We believe that this will create new pathways and new possibilities for ongoing stewardship of Hindu heritage for generations to come. We'll also see the ways in which Hindu perspectives and a Hindu compass can contribute to the vibrancy of American life at large, how we can contribute to the American story. I'm really excited about the first panel that will kick off this series, where we will be exploring the possibilities and the potential of Hindu American temples. I will now hand off the mic to my dear friend, Shohini Ji.
Namaste. Thank you so much, Induji, and thank you so much for hosting us here today. The panel that we are going to be embarking on right now is called Hindu Temples and Their Future in America. And I am so excited to welcome on our lovely panelists. So I will be introducing them now. We have Bhakti Modi, who is currently working as a healthcare analytics in senior healthcare technology and has an MS in health informatics and analytics. She has worked extensively with Hindu Mandir's Executive Conference, World Hindu Council, and various national and regional level Hindu youth and education-based programs and initiatives for the past 20 plus years, actually. So she currently serves as school director for Hindu American Temple School at Hindu Society of Minnesota and is on the senior commission under Chanhassen City Council. She lives in Carver County, Minnesota with her husband and puppy. Next, we have Bhalika Rajan, who is a senior at Vanderbilt University studying medicine, health, and society and neuroscience. That's quite a lineup over there. She is from Nashville, Tennessee, and has attended Sri Ganesha Temple since childhood. She volunteers as a camp counselor and performs Bharatanatyam over the years. Her hobbies include drawing and practicing yoga. She's excited to join the conference today. Next, we have Brahmacharini Shuchita Ji, who is the resident spiritual guide of the Chinmaya Mission Austin. She graduated from Austin College and completed her MPH from UTSPH. She has worked in the research and teaching fields and has organized and conducted camps and retreats for various age groups across college, professional, and mission organizations. She is a graduate of the 17th Vedanta course and joined CMA in 2019. She's immensely grateful for the opportunity to serve Puja Gurudev Swami Chinmayananda Ji through conducting classes and spreading the timeless knowledge of Vedanta. And lastly, we have Shrey Tarpara, who has a BS in economics and is pursuing a master's in organizational psychology. He spent 2 years studying Eastern and Western philosophy in India and has a deep interest in bringing spirituality into daily life. He works as a management consultant and lives with his family in Maryland. So thank you once again for being here today. And I wanted to first start off this panel with a quick icebreaker so that people will get to know you all a little bit better. So I wanted to start out with, what is your favorite memory of being in a mandir and what is your favorite festival? I'll start off with Brahmacharini Ji.
Hari Om, Namaste to everyone. Thank you for having me. So my favorite memory is my dad is a Purohit. He's a priest, he's a Panditji. So when I was a kid, I would just run around all the temples and go downstairs to the prasad place, eat what I want. And then whenever there was certain offerings of Naivedyam that were my favorite, I always got first dibs, and the temple was my playground. So I think for me, the temple raised me, and people who came to the temple also had to raise me. So I enjoyed that. And then favorite festival is a very tough question to answer because as I learn more about each festival, it becomes my favorite. But I'll stick with the classic Deepavali. I enjoy the lights. I enjoy the excitement of Ramji coming back. So I'll stay Deepavali.
Thanks. Next, we'll go to Bhalika.
Namaste, everyone. I would say my favorite mandir memory would be performing at the temple for Bharatanatyam over the years, being able to have that opportunity with my friends and be able to share that part of my culture with my relatives and friends and family. I think my favorite festival would, not to copy Shrutita Ji, but I'd say Deepavali as well. I'm not sure if that cut off. Yeah.
Awesome. Great. So next we'll go to Shrey.
Hey everyone. My favorite memory of a mandir, actually, I had the special privilege to be able to go to the Golden Temple in India, in Amritsar. And that, I feel like, is probably the holiest place on earth because of how pure every feeling is there, right? People are there volunteering to protect the temple, volunteering to feed and protect anyone and everyone who walks into the gates of the temple. And I think for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I think just the energy that you feel there, the people who are there out of selfless devotion, it just makes it my favorite memory of a temple that I think is very, very special. So My favorite holiday, Utsav, I would say, is Ganesh Chaturthi. I had the opportunity to spend 2 years in India in Mumbai, and you see a lot of the whole city and the whole state, honestly, is just so energetic and so passionate. And I think that festival really is a great reminder on all the on all the symbolism behind who Ganesh Bhagwan is and why he has one half tusk and one full tusk. And I think it's very introspective, but also very energizing. So Ganesh Chaturthi for me.
Thanks, Trey. And on to you, Bhakti.
Namaste. My favorite memory of Mandir is very similar to what we started this conversation with. My entire family is very involved with the Mandir. And by that, I don't mean just my parents, my uncles, aunts, cousins. So even if I was visiting family, we were always just at the Mandir. If they were visiting us, we were always at the Mandir. And we're always so busy at the Mandir. I spent majority of my childhood spending like 6, 7, 8, 9, 12 hours on a Sunday, sitting around at a Mandir in the corner by myself, reading every book from the library. And for me, it's like very similar to what was said earlier. The Mandir helped raise me, not just the people, but just the environment, the books, the materials, the energy. It was at the time exhausting, and I begged to go home every 30 minutes. But looking back, it's my favorite thing to think back on. In terms of festival, my favorite festival is a little bit different. My favorite festival is actually Raksha Bandhan. And I know it's not like Deepavali and Holi and all the big ones, but for me, Raksha Bandhan is the best because it's such a great way to connect one-on-one with people in our lives that are important to us. And it's such a unique festival to our Hindu faith. Many faiths and religions around the world have big festivals that they celebrate big things, but Raksha Bandhan is so special because you're celebrating that bond between someone in your family that's so close to you. And it's also one that we can really adapt to our modern times. I now tie Rakhis to not just brothers, but sisters, nieces, nephews, cousins, friends, and it's just a way to really enhance our own personal relationships.
Thanks so much. I can definitely relate to all of the festivals and memories you guys have. So really nice, and thanks for sharing that. So I want us also to get started into talking about our panel topic, which is Hindu temples and their future in America. So I know that this panel has the word temple in it, but I know there's also other words that many of us use, like mandir. And so I just wanted to start off with Shuchita ji. Do you mind telling us, according to the Shastras, what is the definition of mandir or temple, or any of the different words that people might use to describe this?
Sure. So the Sanskritam term is Devalaya or Devasthana. Devalaya is more common. And Deva is Bhagwan. Alaya is home or abode of. So a Devasthana, Devalaya, Mandir is the home of Bhagwan. And usually there is a Prana Pratisthapana, meaning that the Murti in the Sannidhi, in the premises, has life. So there's an enlivening process, and it's every day. That's why you have to do puja. You have to feed, you have to do abhisheka. There are certain rituals that go with it. So there is a prana pratisthapana in the Devalaya. And the second thing is how a Devalaya is built. It is built according to our Shastras, and in the process, the rituals, and the priests involved, everything is listed. And there's different sampradayas, of course, but there is a process. And the Devalaya is the nerve center or the hub of the community. And there would usually be 5 layers or 3 layers. And outside of the temple is the entire economic, transactions, the marketplace, everything. So you had that. And then inside, the arts, the music, all of that was kept alive, dance. And then even outside the premises of the Devalaya, there was even a crematorium. So it includes everything that one needs in life. And there was, of course, always food. There was always shelter for those. And it just served as the home for the entire community, the center of life. So that is originally what Devalaya is. And in many places that is still true, which makes me happy.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So I wanted to go to the other panelists and ask you, based on your own lived experience being part of a mandir or temple community in North America, how would you define mandir or temple in your own experience? So I'll start off with Shrey.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for that beautiful definition. I think, as we growing up in this country, visiting different kinds of temples, participating in different kinds of temple groups, it really shed light to me on what I would consider a real mandir and not. For example, I've been to mandirs where as soon as you finish doing darshan, they make you walk down a hall of fame that has a list of all the donors' names inscribed on the walls, and it really makes it feel like that external marketplace was brought into the mandir, right? A place that should just be devoid of materialism and avoiding kind of the keeping it from being money centered. And so seeing these kinds of mandirs, and it kind of shaped my interest or lack of interest in going to certain types of groups. And I think after visiting different kinds of mandirs, I've come down to what I think is my definition. And that is, a mandir is a place that isn't confined to a specific place where there are, specific gods, idols, but it's rather a place where people can sit together with one another, regardless of their social background or caste, creed, gender, and they can learn thoughts from our scriptures. And those thoughts aren't meant to be listened to, but they help us build a connection to one another, to God, and to the world around us. And I think that mandir, or so in my definition, can take place in a school, in a house. It can take place in a community center, wherever these kinds of thoughts are being shared. And there is the idea of keeping God at the center, whatever God that may be, whatever religion that might be. That is what I consider a mandir. It's having that connection to God, connection to people, and to thoughts.
Thank you, Shrey. Palika, do you want to share your thoughts with us as well?
Yeah, of course. I agree with Shrey on a lot of basis of mandir is very much a place of God and a place to center God. I also would say that it is a sociocultural hub as well, right? So I would consider it a place for, at least my place, what I consider a mandir is to be able to have maybe language learning, or being able to share, like-minded music, Carnatic music, right? That are, while centering God, also bringing you back to your original cultural roots. And especially as someone who was born in the United States, very much in a white Christian community, being able to find that place and call it my home in that sense.
Thank you so much. And Bhakti, can you share your thoughts with us as well?
Yeah. So for me, I think one of the initial definitions that came in, Shachiraji, thank you for that, about, mandirs where we think about where we have Bhagwan, where we have certain energy, where we have certain experiences. And I think when I say mandir, in my mind, can mean either the temple structure that I go to, or the little tiny mandir I have downstairs right outside my kitchen. So for me, mandir is a place of some form of worship, some form of focused attention and connection. But when we think of the temple institution, I think of it as a place of solace, a place of connection, a place to come back to that's meant for someone like me, right? So growing up, like Palika said, growing up as a minority in this country, you sometimes don't have that. You feel a little lost, you feel a little disconnected. So coming back to a temple, a building, an organization is a form of, all right, this is where I can level set my identity. This is where I can level set who I am, find someone of similar mindsets and backgrounds and experiences. But when I think about doing a puja at a mandir, for me, that could be either at the temple or downstairs in my own home or someone else's house or anything. So I think the definition also differs based on what we're expecting to get out of any experience or situation.
Thanks so much, Bhakti. So I wanted to jump into our next question, which is really kind of getting to the root of this panel, which is, what are the challenges that mandirs face in accommodating different generations? So, I really like the way this this question is phrased, because oftentimes we say, what are the challenges mandirs can face in accommodating youth? But really, mandirs need to be able to serve all different generations. So, Halika, do you mind getting started with answering this question?
Yeah, I'd love to. I think the main challenge that mandirs face in accommodating various generations, like you mentioned, not just the youth, is, I guess, the variations in communication and understanding between these generations, and especially coming from, right, these first gen Indians coming from India, having that cultural background, having a basic understanding of Hinduism, being able to refer to that within the mandir, as opposed to second generation people like me, or even third generation, having less of a clear understanding or that cultural basis behind them. And like I mentioned earlier, I come from a very, I'm a minority within the area of Nashville, Tennessee, most definitely. And while we have programs in my mandir like Bal Vihar, which are great for, discussing slohams and discussing stories and the meaning behind them, I think one challenge, especially that I, as a second generation, temple goer, face is the question of why, right? I think especially in American culture, it is very much question the man culture. And that is reflected when you enter the temple space in the fact that, why am I doing this part of the puja? Why is it that we care about this aspect of this procedure, of this function? And so parents, there's two sides of this, right? You have the parents who are, getting incessantly questioned by their children of why, when they just know it as tradition. I think that's often a common, like, oh, why am I circling in a clockwise rotation around or a counterclockwise rotation, during a function? It's often just tradition, right? And then that's accepted. But I think that kind of sideswipes, in a way, the opportunity for greater emotional involvement for, different generations when you don't understand why that's going on, especially when it's not the majority around you that follow, the majority in the community. So I think a main focus in communication understanding is bringing the true meaning of functions, whatever generation you're in, having a few moments of explaining the steps of, for instance, a puja, right? So at this moment we are doing, we are bathing Lord Ganesha in, milk, honey, etc. for X, Y, and Z. And I think that itself can be like a great leveling basis for that. For that disconnectivity between like mandirs and accommodation for different generations. I think especially, another challenge that mandirs face is having to deal with the outside of the mandir itself, because there's not that, Hindu majority outside in the United States. You have the challenge of having to deal with and kind of accommodate to, whether it be children, adults who have this othering within the outside of the temple. So I've already mentioned white Christian majority in my area, Nashville, Tennessee. From a young age, I feel like I've had the pressure of having to explain Hinduism when I don't fully understand it myself to those who are interrogating, well, what is Hinduism? Are you polytheistic? What is that dot on your forehead? So being able to, I think someone mentioned this earlier, ground yourself within the mandir, having that safe space, being able to accommodate different generations in that sense as well is very important.
Bhakti, I would love to hear your thoughts on this question as well.
Yeah, so this whole question of the challenges mandir face in different generations. So in any culture, anywhere in the world you go, even if you have a majority culture, you're going to have a basic challenge of generational gap. What we face is an extra nuance to that. We're not only facing a generational gap, we're facing a cultural gap, a language barrier, a mindset barrier. And because many of the leaders at our temples are people who came to the US in a very different experience, different world, different time. And they worked so hard to build these amazing institutions for us, right? Now, we don't have that same struggle, the same mindset. So it's hard for us to kind of understand a lot of that. And the difficulty goes in both directions. So, and this is commonplace across all temples, and anywhere you go, you will have the elders of the community who say, the youth are not coming. They're not listening. We don't know how to connect to them. Why won't they come? These kids don't think about anything other than their phone these days. We've all heard this. And then on the flip side, you've got all the youth going, oh, the adults don't want to listen to us. They just want to tell us how to do things. This is not how we live. both are right, both are wrong, right? So it's not one or the other. It's not one versus the other. Each generation is facing very specific challenges that the other generation is having difficulty relating to. So the problem that temples are experiencing is the way up until now our culture has progressed is different than how it needs to progress going forward. We cannot continue with just these are the traditions. We have to continue with these are the traditions that have worked, but let's reevaluate, readjust, and refocus our energy on how we should really sustain this going forward. So, like Balika said, why is so important? If you can, the minute a child, a youth, an outsider asks the question of why and you cannot answer it, it does not matter, their interest is gone. And one of the different things is there is a difficulty for different generations to connect simply because of basic mindset. There's no right or wrong here, right? We're just understanding the limitations that we have. In our traditional culture, going back, we were always taught, even in our teachings, you respect the elders and you listen to what they say and you don't question them. But kids growing up here are taught literally the opposite. You question everything. You question authority. You question your traditions. Now, when you have two people with these two mindsets, obviously there's going to be some clash and challenges. So it's not for us to say the other is right or wrong. It's for us to understand when someone asks a question, they're not being disrespectful or rude. That's just how they were raised. And the opposite, if someone is not answering us, maybe they're not pushing us off. Maybe they just don't know, or they just don't understand how to explain it. So the biggest gap is amongst that also language. There are many elders in our community who may not be so comfortable as to speak English in a way that can be easily communicated to the younger generation. So it's so important for us to have multi-levels of resources, right? So how many of us are using audio, visual, digital, virtual resources to complement what we're teaching? It's not to replace the human interaction and the prayers and the speeches of the pundits and all that. It's to enhance that. So, for example, I know my temple does this, and I've seen others. When there are prayers going on, have it up on a screen, the shlok with the meaning and the description of what's going on. Have it on a phone, on a QR code. Let's not be so worried that kids have their noses in their phone. Let's be worried, are we giving them the right information when their noses are in their phones? And vice versa. Are we, as kids, as youth, are we afraid to ask the questions? Or can we be a little uncomfortable and push for an answer in order for us to move forward? So there's a very different change in how we need to approach people being at the mandir, at the temples, whether doesn't matter if they're 20 or 80 or 50, if they're with kids, without kids, the expectations of the world are changing. And that's where mandirs are slowly learning, but that's the biggest challenge most temples face and that I've seen consistently across everywhere.
Thank you, Bhakti. I saw a lot of people sending likes with that. So really appreciate your thoughts there. And I think that leads us very directly into our next set of questions, which is what can mandirs do to be more inviting to youth? And similarly, one of our audience members asked this question. It is observed that today's youth do not like going to temples. So how can we make today's generation go to temples with willingness? And I think those two are kind of tied together. So I wanted to start off with Brahmacharya Niji on your thoughts regarding these questions.
So I'll start by saying that if I didn't have the why, I definitely would not have been on this path, right? Because I did grow up here and I asked why every step of the way, irrespective of my background with my parents or, the Chinmaya mission. If I never got something that sat well in myself with conviction, I couldn't. So I think my parents have a lot of credit when it comes to samskaras, and then Chinmaya Mission gave me the reasons. So what do we do in Chinmaya Mission Austin to address this? Well, firstly, with Ganesh Chaturthi, we have all of the kids perform the puja step by step. We have our panditjis inside and they are chanting and they do it, and then the kids watch and they also do puja, and I explain every step with them. And somebody told me it was so sweet to see their 5-year-old offer a banana to a Ganeshji and say, it's his birthday, he needs it, and then eat it, because that's the love and bhakti that we're trying to develop at a young age, right? So we have that for the young kids. And then we have Balavihar classes. Why do we do is an actual book that we have. And then for our JTRICs or 9th through 12th grade, we have a series of camps. We have lock-ins, and we ask them to bring topics to the table that they've had questions about for a long time. And we talk about caste, we talk about Hindu phobia, we talk about how to adjust to expectations of this country versus what our parents have. And it's been very enlightening for me. I've learned a lot from them. And then I also see a lot of myself in their questions. So that's what we do for the youth. And then once they graduate from here, we have something called Chinmaya Yuva Kendra. And they are the sevaks that run a lot of the events we have at our temple. Most of the sevaks that came for Shivratri a few years ago were all college kids that grew up, understanding and wanting to be involved with the abhishekams, with the pujas, the rituals. There was meaning in it, and there was science in it. And I think the best thing that parents can do when kids have those questions is when they don't know, actually say, I don't know. Let's look for the answer together. Because that's when we seek the truth. And there is an answer for everything in Sanatana Dharma. There is nothing that's done on a whim, right? So yes, we value tradition, but at the same time, we can say, I don't know, but let's figure it out together. And at that point, we're doing a better, we're better representing our humility and our Sanatana Dharma while learning along with the kids. And I teach adult classes while the kids are in Balavihar, and it's been amazing to see that bridge, kind of come closer and closer together from both ends. And I also visit people's homes for Piksha, so lunch or dinner Piksha, and we have all of these conversations in their homes, and that really helps the generations kind of bridge and connect with each other. So there's a lot we can do, there's a lot we're doing, and it has been helpful, and I've seen it. I've seen so many of us come back, people from my generation who have kids, bringing their kids and learning along with their kids. And they say that after 4 or 5 years, that there's so much we didn't know, and we're so glad to be learning from our kids the meaning behind all of this. So that's what we do here.
Thank you so much, Brahmacharini ji. I will now ask Shrey, if you don't mind answering the same questions about what mandirs can do to be more inviting to youth and how to get youth to go to mandirs more willingly.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this question because growing up, this was, my parents' battle. And over the next few years, I have a baby girl now. I know it's going to be my challenge as well. And it's funny to see how our perspectives change. Growing up, similar to how, everyone has stated so far, the youth have so many questions, as did I. And there were people who answered those questions with, just do it, it'll make sense, don't ask questions. And then there were people who treated kids like adults. And they made it a journey to not only build our curiosity, but to also deepen our understanding of why things are the way they are. And I think one takeaway that I've had growing up is that when kids have questions, we have to treat them as adults, right? They know so much more than we did when we were their age because of the internet and the world and how everyone talks about things. And so if we don't treat them like adults, if we don't treat them with respect, how are we going to expect them to be interested? And then B, how are we going to expect them to have any sort of excitement about the positive and beautiful thoughts that our culture has? We, and in addition to that, as we are questioned and we are asked why we do certain things, there are going to be times when we realize that, man, those traditions, they might slightly be outdated, right? Or there may be a more appropriate way to celebrate it and do it now. And I love how Bhakti ji said that she celebrates Raksha Bandhan with, not just her brothers, but her sisters and people that, she wants to value that relationship with. And a lot of times, one of the big turnoffs for me and for a lot of the kids that I work with has been when the elders get defensive, or when the people who are in charge say that, hey, like, just don't worry about it right now, it'll make sense, or like, who do you think you are to ask us these questions, right? That kind of defensiveness does not deepen our love for our culture. And I think one example really comes to mind for me is that, so when I was getting married, the pujari that did our wedding, the priest, he had us sit down, me, my wife, and both of our families, sit down before the wedding to kind of do a walkthrough and to explain to us that, hey, I'll explain things that we're doing during the ceremony as well, but I want to go in a little bit more detail with you guys on why we're doing certain things. So traditionally, at least with what I've seen with a lot of Gujarati weddings, is that we usually have we walk around the fire 4 times. And 3 of those times, for Dharma, Artha, and Kam, the male is leading the loop around the fire. And the 4th one, it's the female that leads it. Now, this priest was like, look, back in the day, this may have been more applicable because it was the man who worked, it was the man who led certain parts of their lifestyle. But today, men and women do the same exact thing, right? Women go to work full time, men help with the children, right? There's equal responsibilities. And so he was a big proponent of, let's do 7 circles around the fire, where I led 3, my wife led the same 3. So dharma for me, dharma for her, right? And then the 7th one, we both walked together. And I think that just made so much sense to me. The fact that he was able to say, look, something we did back then made sense at that time, but now times have changed. How can we take that same thought and apply it to today's context? And I think that is such a powerful ability, is to find innovative ways to make our culture connect to the people in this next generation. And a lot of times without that, it seems like a foreign concept. It seems like the priests are people we can't understand. It seems like the elders are people who don't want to listen. But if we have that kind of connection, or that ability, adaptability to keep our mindset and reasoning the same, but maybe alter the rituals based on what makes sense today, I think that's a very key component to keeping youth interested and knowledgeable on what we do and why.
Thanks so much, Trey. Would love to get Palika's thoughts on this question as well, especially since you are, a youth who's very heavily engaged in Ganesh Mandir. Would love to hear your thoughts on how to get your colleagues, your peers, your classmates more involved as well.
Yeah, I think Trey gave a great, basic understanding of like what's going on, what's, the phenomenon that's going on. I think from, my colleague perspective, my own perspective, a big way to propagate, more youth to come to the temple is what I like to call by the youth for the youth, right? So you're having greater youth involvement, and it's coming from the perspectives of people who, have gone through. So for instance, for me, growing up in the temple, myself having those perspectives of, I grew up in the American culture, or as opposed to I grew up in X, Y, and Z. I grew up in India. I grew up, elsewhere. Being able to have that sense of relatability to your colleagues or to those younger than you, and also opening up conversations, right, about how is Hinduism now relevant to us? Why should we care about, these wonderful teachings within our religion, and how can we apply that within our, within our mandirs, within ourselves now? And this can be, whether it be through something like a youth group where someone slightly older is talking to the younger generations and having, non-judgmental conversations on what's going on. Or this can be something like, oh, we're all banding together and organizing like a service. So a cause that we care about, and we're doing it via the temple because it, reflects what our values hold. So being able to bring these relevant topics and conversations in a non-judgmental space, I think is a great way to invite the youth, and being able to propagate that via other youth members, right, is a great way.
Thank you so much, Palika. So I want to jump into a question that I think you guys have already started addressing. So, feel free to add some new points in here. So the question is, how are the needs of the Hindu community changing? And I want to start with Bhakti on this question.
Thank you. So I'm actually going to, with this answer, come across some of the questions that have come in through the Q&A because they're all going to tie into some of this stuff. So we've talked a lot about the needs, meaning the approach on how a different generation learns versus, older versus younger generation approach on our traditions and values and the need for adjusting those. And I love that example, Shrey, so much. And it's the same thing with festivals, right? So I like in my husband's family, they celebrate Karva Chauth, but living in this day and age as a strong female, thinking about the fact that I have to fast for my husband, oh goodness, that just makes me cringe a little. But that's not the point of the festival. The point, it was originated for a different reason, but also it can be adjusted. So now my husband and I, we both fast together, we both do the same prayer together, and that's what's important about the festival. The festival is for a spouse. So when the needs of the Hindu community changing is not so much that we need to change our shastras, we need to change our temples, we need to learn how to adapt to the modern and changing world. What we have now has never existed before. This is unprecedented. Frankly, no one knows how to handle this. We're all trying together and no one has the right answer. So when we think about it that way, then we get less defensive about it because the youth don't have the answer, the adults don't have the answer. So then why can't we work together to find a new answer? So the needs are changing in the sense that there is more need than ever for a collective effort than everyone doing their own thing. An example I'm going to say is one of the questions that came in is, how are other religions managing so well? Well, let me tell you, they're not. We only hear what the media tells us. If you actually go down into the gist of it, every faith, every religion is facing the same problem. The slight difference with certain are if there's a majority, then they may not have as big of a problem versus if they're a minority. But let me give you an example of, it feels like a lot of people of Islamic background, Judaism, all of them, they seem a little bit stronger. And there's a reason for that, because their teachings are consistent. You can go from any Jewish center to any Jewish center, they're teaching their kids the same thing. You go from any Islamic house to another one, they are teaching from the same book. So that's the difference. In our community, we're in Navratri, right? We've got a group of people who are doing Durga Puja, a group of people who are doing Garba, a group of people doing something else, a region in India who only celebrates Ganesh Chaturthi, a region who only reads Vishnu Sahasranam. We don't even have consistency in our teachings. How can we have consistency as a community? Right? So the idea is all of these rituals are great. The traditions are great. It's important for us to continue our heritage, but we have to go back to our foundational teachings, which are things like our Shastras, like our Vedic teachings, our Upanishads, our Gita. Those are not based on regions. Those are not based on traditions. Those are based on knowledge. So when we start reverting back our own education process into the foundations, then it will be easier to have a comprehensive effort going forward. Because like Malika said, kids growing up here, if someone, I've been asked this at school, I grew up here. I was a middle schooler during the time of 9/11. That was very formative. I was called out for my skin color. I was called out for being brown. And so for me, it was so important for me to understand, because that's why there's a big generation of people who are turned away, because they never got the answers they needed during a time where they were being criticized. I was being criticized for wearing a dot on my head. And if I don't know what that means, why would I continue to do it? So if we don't have consistent answers to the same questions, why will there be sustainability going forward? There can't be. So the needs of the community are focused on sustainability as minorities. I come back to that word a lot, minorities, because the minute you understand being a minority comes with a different set of challenges, only then can you work towards overcoming those challenges. We are not in India where we have a little mandir on every corner and you go doing darshan. That's not what this is about anymore. A temple is a place of not just worship, of community, of identity, of safety, right? But now think about it. In this day and age, we now have a security guard at our temple on Sundays because temple is no longer safe, because we're now at risk because we're a minority. So now all of a sudden our place of safety is no longer safe. How do we approach that? Are we telling kids what that means? Are we making them feel okay with that? We have a lot of beauty in our teachings where we have room for interpretation. And that comes with both pros and cons. The pros is we can adjust. The cons is sometimes we lose the common message when we do that. So as temples, we're responsible for sometimes filtering out all the extra noise, all the extra traditions and the different heritages and going back to basics. And that's where a lot of temples can really, really help move this movement forward.
Thank you, Bhakti. Shrey, can you also answer this question about how are the needs of the Hindu community changing?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with everything that Bhaktiji said, right? I think the world as a whole, right? We're going through two different events, global events that are happening right now. The information age, where everything can be found on Google, right? Google answers more questions about our culture than our parents and grandparents did, which is amazing because we have access to it, but it's actually pretty terrifying because anyone and everyone can put their answers on a website and anyone can access it, right? So there's so much good things that has brought to us, but then we got to be careful how often it's used. And the second thing, so we have the information age, and the second is extremism. And we're seeing it in every culture, in every religion, all around the world. And I think, similar to what Bhaktiji said, I think there is so much diversity in how we celebrate festivals, celebrate and understand our scriptures, which is very, very powerful. But at certain points, it's also leading to barriers between communities, right? We're not seeing, we're seeing only certain groups of people welcome at temples, or we're seeing like, oh, this temple is more for Tamil families. This temple group or association is more Gujarati families, right? That kind of segregation is what's holding us back. And I think to get to it, right, if we get into what the Gita says of Sarvasya Chaham Hridi Sannivishta, that there's that same God within everyone, and if we keep the fundamental values from our scriptures instead of other texts, then I think, and other information sources, then I think that's the way we move forward, right? That's how we can build unity and avoid being like, oh, that person goes to the Chinmaya mission, so like that's their group. I'm gonna sit at the table where they go to, somewhere else. And I think the only way we can get over those kinds of barriers is if we have a good understanding of what our scriptures actually say, the Ved, Upanishad, Gita, and are able to convey it to people of all generations. And like we were saying in the comments, right? It's perfectly fine if we don't know the answers, but we're going to get asked the same question again. And if I can't answer it right now, when I get asked again in a month, if I can't answer it then, that's my fault. So we need to have the curiosity and the initiative to build that kind of curiosity based off of what the scriptures say. And I think that will help us kind of counter the false claims that people might read about our culture on the internet and based on what their friends are saying, or any of that kind of misinformation that we might be hearing. So I think that's how we can counter those two conflicts and adapt to a changing Hindu and global community.
Thank you, Shrey. I think we're going to jump into our next question, which is, will the purpose of mandirs change in the next 50 to 100 years down the line? And I wanted to start off with Shuchita ji.
So, all of this conversation is great. And I think it's a matter of going back, like we're all talking about, going back to the original purpose of what a Devalaya was meant to do. And it's everything people here have said. And it's not like we're coming up with some trajectory towards like something crazy in 50, 100 years. We're going back to seeing our Devalaya as the center of our lives. And people are talking about financially as well. People lived in small huts and stuff around the temple, but they would still give to the temple because that was seen as that protection, that security. And so I think that we are going back to how things were, which is you have the core teachings, you have the place of service, a place of worship, a place of, there were gardens around, there was Ayurveda around, all of our vidyas that had been taught through Sanatana Dharma, everything was enlivened. And I think we're going back to that slowly because of the whys that are coming up. And another aspect to address is, yes, we need to be aligned on our foundational texts and our foundational explanations for things, but the diversity of Sanatana Dharma is an aspect of sophistication, right? We are so sophisticated as a practice that every individual can have their own sadhana, right? I can chant every day and that is going to connect me to Bhagwan. Somebody else can do puja every day. Somebody else can sit in a satsang every day, right? And we have karma yoga, we have bhakti yoga, we have jnana yoga. It's sophisticated. And for us to feel like it's holding us back is where we have to, I think, work together and not see the differences between all the organizations and say, no, this is how they do it or this is that group. We say, hey, we have this Deepavali celebration. All the temples are celebrating in a different way. We can choose, but what the purpose of Deepavali is there, right? There should be some aspect of education in it. There should be some aspect of celebration in it. And then the prasads people make, and if you want paratha versus you want some rice item, that's up to us, right? Because that's the beauty of it. So I see, us going back to the original purpose of what a Devalaya was, to be our future. It's not something unthought of. Yes, it is unprecedented times, but that's when we go back and hold on tighter to our roots, right? So I'll stop here.
Thank you so much. Bhakti, do you mind also addressing this question about where do you see the purpose of mandirs changing, or how do you see them changing in the next 50 to 100 years?
So based on my experience and the work that I do with education programs at mine and various temples, I think going forward, it's going to be very important for temples to become centers of education and spirituality, more than just places of pujas and rituals. Obviously, that will always be a part of it and always should be a part of it. That's our foundation. We're not moving away from that. But like we talked about, the needs of the community changing, we need a place where people can come to be educated, to come to have in personal growth, spiritual growth, growth as a community, growth as in just learning. And let me tell you, there are people out there who want to know, but they don't know where to go. And they end up on Google. Like Sherry said, they end up on reading an article someone wrote for a news media somewhere else, and that is a biased view. We have hundreds, millions, thousands. We have so many resources. Every temple has, an amazing collection of books, but are we making those accessible to the public? When we talk about a library, I don't just mean a public library. I mean a library where you have satsangs once a week, once a month, where you have a book club, where people college students can come in and say, I learned about this in one of my classes in my thing. This doesn't seem right. Who can answer my question? When we have this isn't just for external public, it's for internal people at the mandir. So we talk a lot about priests and some of the generational gap that priests have at mandirs with connecting. Is this an education center for them too? There's a lot of priests who are educated somewhere else in the world, and of course they're going to have some gaps. Are we holding classes at the temple for the priests? Why not? Why not have a class at the temple that connects a younger generation with priests and they learn from each other? Like, this is what this means when a kid asks this question versus a priest saying, when I do this, this is what I mean. Am I doing it right? So the temples need to be focused on education, whether it's dharmic education, cultural, traditional, religious, spiritual. Just saying we do yoga class once a week isn't enough. Are we really explaining and having the guidance for what yoga means to our own teachings? What is meditation? How do we get there? So education is key. it doesn't, and I'm not just talking K through 12, because a lot of times young professionals, and I say this because I grew up here, and most of my Hindu friends don't go back to temples because this is what they need and this is what they don't get. They don't get a place where they can be non-judgmentally. I know we don't mean to be judgmental. We all mean well. I know that. But we do have unintentional bias and judgment that comes out when we don't pay attention to it. So we need a place where people can come, be safe, and focus on growth and learning. So it's not just about K through 12 school. It's not just about Bal Vihars and schools and mandir structures and things like that. It's learning centers, spiritual centers, and having an opportunity for people to use this for a research project, right? There are many people in school, whether it's high school, college, they want to do research on Hindu dharma, Hindu spirituality. Many of them use Google as a resource. Why can't Mandir be the resource of our own spiritual education? So we have so many knowledgeable people. Let's utilize that to actually create a structure that would be very, very useful to the public, right? And I saw a question come in, and I appreciate that question coming in. I know I used the word judgmental, which is going to make a lot of people defensive. And that's literally what I mean by judgmental. When we say things we don't like, we get very defensive. When people say things we don't like, we get very defensive. Wait, what do you mean? That's not what Om means. Well, I was taught like this. Guess what? There's probably 10 right answers. And all people's experiences are probably correct. And that's the beauty of our teachings, like Suchita ji said, right? We have so much variety and so much sophistication, but sometimes that gets lost in translation. So when we say judgmental, we're not being mean to people. We're getting defensive, which then shuts off the person who's asking a question. So having a safe environment when people can ask questions without having to defend their own questions is just as important as it is to provide resources. And a lot of places are doing a much better job. I'm not saying that this isn't meant to be a very cynical conversation. This is just meant to be very practical, that these are some of the challenges people of this generation are facing. And if we want to know why they're not coming, this is why. And there are a lot of great resources, and it's important for mandirs to collaborate with each other. Every temple is very, very focused on what they're doing, right? It's our material, it's our classes, it's our donors, it's our logo. But guess what? There's probably another temple out there who's faced the same challenge. Maybe they've solved it. Are we willing to put aside our own name to actually benefit the needs of the society by working with someone else? So conferences like these are so important because we have, for example, I know that Hindu American Foundation has this great Diwali kit, I think, for youth, and we share that every year during Diwali with our school program. Hinduism Today has a great guides on the top 10 questions about Hindu Dharma. We share that with people who come in for interfaith conversations at our mandir. We don't have to reinvent the wheel every time, right? Our temple has this great, we've created a festivals project where we've created practical presentations on every festival for the modern youth. And I know at least 5 other temples are using it. So, and it's open to everyone. So every temple has its strength. It's time for us to understand that if we're not the strongest at something, doesn't mean we have to try. We have to work with someone else who is. So that's the need of the communities. Again, coming back to that collective effort, community effort, the temple is going to have to be more of a community effort than just a place to come do puja path.
Thank you, Bhakti. So I wanted us to jump into some more of the audience questions, and we've been getting a ton of questions, and I know this has been answered, throughout some of our responses already, but just to kind of really take it home, I wanted to ask you all some more questions on diversity and unity, and I'm going to group these questions together so we can better answer them. One question is, should we have a guide, like a guidance manual with FAQs? We have a question for Bhakti that given that we have so many different sampradayas, can we reasonably aspire for consistency in the large? Consistency on Bindi explanation should be doable, but can we truly achieve consistency across sampradayas? Another question that we have is the speakers have highlighted diversity amongst followers of Sanatan Dharma, and is that an obstacle for unity? So I wanted to actually first ask Suchita ji, sorry about that, to answer and just kind of give us a little bit more light on this whole topic of diversity and unity. And then Bhakti, I want to hear your thoughts as well.
Sure. So when we talk about Sanatana Dharma, I think we keep trying to fit it into the Abrahamic lens of what religion should be. So the Abrahamic view of one book, one prophet, one type of relationship with God, and only one God, right? But we fail to recognize that Sanatana Dharma is a civilization and how a civilization was built. And it's built on inquiry, right? Never were our ancestors told don't question in the past. It's only become a recent thing because of moving from country to country and things like that. But it's built on questioning, debating, understanding, and choosing what I can authentically live, right? To be that, have that integrity, right? So we can't say we want to fit into the Abrahamic lens, because then we're doing a disservice to Sanatana Dharma. At the same time, the notion of questioning, inquiry, and seeking, that is a substratum for Sanatana Dharma. And that can be influenced and infused into all sampradayas, right? All sampradayas believe you need to go into the text to understand. Now, again, with Sanatana Dharma, it includes Hinduism, it includes Jainism, Buddhism, Sikhism. We're all under the same umbrella of Sanatana Dharma. So it is possible, but it can only be possible when we recognize that we live differently and we celebrate differently and we teach differently. So I know that seems like a contradiction, but in accepting the diversity rather than shunning people for their belief systems, I think there's so much to be gained. Just because I didn't grow up worshiping Bhagwan Shivji or Bhagwan or Devi, Bhagavati Devi, doesn't mean I can't celebrate Shivratri or Navratri, right? There's so many celebrations. And if we're just open to that, rather than saying this isn't true, it's possible. And I had my lessons on this too. I grew up with Yajurveda chanting, and I went to a wedding and they were chanting Samaveda and the Purusha Suktam. And I grew up hearing the Purusha Suktam my whole life. And I was like, this sounds wrong. Like, how can they have somebody chant it wrong? And then I asked the Panditjis, and that's the step to take, right? Rather than just judging based off of our notions of religion, we can ask, hey, where did you study? What sampradaya is this from? They said, this is, a different, Shukla Yajurveda chanting. And I said, wow, this has its own beauty to it, right? So it's recognizing, accepting the diversity, and having the roots still there, knowing that we are built on inquiry. We are built on understanding and seeking the truth. That's across the board. Seeking of truth is across the board. So for me, that's the basis. And Bhakti Ji, it can definitely add. I know you have a lot of experience with this.
I'm going to actually let maybe Shrey and Balika answer. I've been monopolizing the talk a little bit, so I'll pause for a minute.
Malika, any thoughts?
To be honest, no, I don't really have any further thoughts. I think, and I just kind of come back to that basic core idea of just communication, understanding, and trust. And I know obviously like these are very basic concepts, and we're always working hard to make these more effective and, be more empathetic, but utilizing our core values, and we can still maintain diversity within our religion and our practices, but I guess sharing how it comes back to the core principles. I know Bhakti Ji delved in this a bit earlier, so I won't go too hard into this at this point, but being able to utilize these, various wonderful, beautiful traditions, like Shruti Ji just said, and being able to bring them back to our core values, bringing back relevance, communicating relevance and understanding. yes, not feeling threatened by other variations and not being defensive is very important.
Yeah. And the one thing I'd like to add is opening our experiences, similar to what Shachita ji said here. An example I say is, this is a little different, but a few years back, one festival season, me and two of my friends, we decided to do like almost like an interfaith festival season. So for Diwali, I had my Christian friend and Muslim friend join us in our home for Diwali. That year for Eid, I went to my friend's house for their Eid celebrations. And then for Christmas, I went with my friend to her church. And in that, just that minor effort of making an effort to learn about something else, it was like an immediate disappearance of any stereotypes we may have accidentally built up in our heads. And I know that's an example of interfaith, but we can do that same thing ourselves, right? So if someone is coming from a Gujarati background, why don't you take some of your non-Gujarati friends and explain Navratri the way you celebrate it? If someone is coming from a Bengali background, explain Durga Puja and the importance of that. Someone from Marathi, explain Ganesh Chaturthi. And it's not so much that we're doing different things, it's bring other people into that just to increase the knowledge base. We're not limiting it, we're growing. So the same concept is whether it's interfaith or within our dharma, within our teachings, when we don't know something, we accidentally create stereotypes in our minds. And that's really hard to overcome until we put a little bit of effort. So for example, at our temple, when we teach festivals, we don't just teach about the festivals, we try to do, in this region, they celebrate it like this. In this region, they celebrate it like this, because all of those are valid and we don't want to get rid of that. That is the beauty of our culture and our traditions and our heritage. We just have so much color, so much energy, so much vibrance that you're not going to get that anywhere else. So we don't want to diminish that even one bit. So that's, and that's very important for multi-generational purposes as well, because people who are born and raised here are not going to identify with those same structures, right? Like I know that my family is technically Gujarati, but like I don't have that same connection to a heavy Gujarati culture that even one or two generations before me did. I mean, I still do, but growing up here, I'm Hindu first, Gujarati second, right? And that actually Hindu first, Indian second, third is Gujarati. So when we are focused on these cultural things, we have to realize that's actually the third part of our identity growing up here. That has to come in third, not first. So that has to be part of it, but can't be the central focus of how we think and behave with our teachings in this country.
Thank you,
And I
Bhakti.
think just to add right onto what Bhaktiji said, it's not only that we have to, celebrate it and appreciate how other parts of our country may have celebrated this festival, but it's also our job to educate. And I love that you said that, we want to teach them how they celebrate the same utsav in a different manner, because the only way we can actually emphasize the values that we're trying to teach is by showing how different, in how many different ways it can be celebrated, right? The core root of Navratri may be the same. The value itself that we want to teach the next generation is the same. But if people celebrate it in 5 different ways and each of them are valid, like that's increases appreciation for whoever is learning this of our culture, and it deepens the understanding of the value.
Thank you. I guess we ended up hearing from all of our panelists on that question, on those questions. Very, very thought-provoking questions from the audience. So I have another question that's switching gears. So I wanted to know, each of the panelists, if you could tell us a little bit more about what your views on Hindu priesthood school is, and what is the best way to teach second or third generation Hindus who are, as I guess I'm trying to interpret this question a bit, as priests are still coming from India and sometimes language barriers can be an issue. I think an example was even just yesterday, we had a Purohit come from our local mandir, and he's really lovely, did a lovely puja. But at the end, when he was being asked to kind of talk a little bit about Durga Puja and give us some thoughts, someone asked, "Oh, can you say it in English for the kids?" And he said, "I could try, but I'll probably say it incorrectly. So do you mind just translating it to your children?" And I, obviously I have no problem with that. But it does kind of disconnect the children from being able to understand. So, they sat there for the next 5 minutes, not being able to really understand much. And so can you tell us a little bit more about, your views on having priesthood schools and what we can do to kind of encourage more people to join? And I guess I will start with Shuchitaji, and then I think Bhakti and Shreya would also like to answer, so you can jump in right after her.
Yeah, so Chinmay Mission in India has a school, a Purohit course, and everybody is allowed to join that from wherever part of the world. And so some of them go back to places that don't speak English, right? So it works for them. And in our temple, we have just gotten added to our family 2 priests from India, and they're working on their English, right? They do English classes, they interact with the community, they're learning our culture, right? Because it's a culture shock for them as well. And what they studied when it came to our Shastras was different from what I studied when it came to our Shastras. I studied the more of the symbolic, meaning of things. I studied more of the Upanishads, right? In terms of understanding and how to convey the message to others. Whereas with them, it was a lot of chanting and rituals. So when both of us converse about any kind of puja that we do, we bridge that gap between us and we help each other out, right? Because our priests are phenomenal. Like, most of them speak 4, 5, 6 different languages. It doesn't happen to be English, right? But they have the ability to do that. Second thing is we have chanting classes for kids and adults here, right? And basic how to do a puja, whether it's Satyarayana Puja, whether it's Ganesh Puja, Lakshmi Puja, as Hindus, we're all able to do those pujas as long as we understand what it means and the shlokas. We learn the shlokas and the mantras. So in terms of having a purohit, in our devalayas, you don't need some, in between for your connection with God, right? We don't need the confession. We don't need a barrier between us and Bhagwan. We can worship Bhagwan directly. So when it comes to the smaller pujas we do at home, we can learn how to do that from the priest and do it and explain it. And when it comes to the chanting and the rituals and all of those things, they can teach us. So we have classes for kids, we have classes for adults, and there are people being trained here on how to do basic rituals. And they've actually done rituals at our temple. Like, we didn't have a priest during COVID. We as sevaks did the pujas and abhishekams. I did the abhishekam, right? And I didn't go to a traditional purohit school, but the meaning of it was there, the intention was there, so we moved forward, we managed, right? So I think it's about learning from each other and knowing that, yes, language, English, people can learn. And our community speaks a diversity of other languages too. So respecting their knowledge and be willing to share and go back and forth.
Thank you so much. Shrey and Bhakti, do you guys want to jump in?
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. So one of the things I'd mentioned earlier, utilizing all our cool new digital resources in the world, right? So one thing I've seen at a couple of gurudwaras, which I love, when there's something going on, they have multiple screens with a full explanation of what's going on. So that kind of takes a little bit of the pressure off anyone who's performing the services, because that's hard for them, right? They have this responsibility of doing things right, but then on top of that, learning a new language and a new culture and connecting, that's a lot to put on a person. So let's release that burden a little bit. So for example, if you have a Mahashivratri puja going on, have the Rudram going along the side, have the meaning, and have the quick explanation of what's going on and why. So they may not have, it would be nice for them to stop and speak, but if they're not comfortable, that won't make the situation more difficult than it has to be. So utilizing all the new resources we have available to us these days, now we can really enhance our process rather than change it completely and cause a lot of discomfort.
Shrey?
Yeah, I think in our own ways, we're all, priests or ambassadors for our culture, right? We are the face of our culture to the rest of the world. And we are not going to, not everyone is going to have the chance to go through a formalized priesthood school to be able to represent that, right? But in our, I think we can do it best to our capability and level. And what I mean by that is, for me, I'm not going to be able to learn all of the stotrams that are out there. I may learn 2 or 3, and if I can do those for an utsav with the same love and intention to celebrate that utsav, then I think that's powerful, right? And if I can explain the significance of that stotra and I can convey that to other people of different generations, then I think, that's good enough. I think there doesn't need to be, we don't need to go through a 1 or 2 year long courses where we learn about the intricacies of every stotra, right? Because then at the end, that might just create more barriers and not everyone will be able to do it. But if we, as responsible adults in the community, can take the responsibility and say, hey, like, I want to be able to at least answer these types of questions to my youth and do what it takes, then we can live up to that ambassador or that, mini priest title, that to the level of, hey, we can be proud of who we are, we can explain it, and at the end of the day, we can build connections with people. And I think that's maybe more effective and practical than having a formalized schooling process for that.
Thanks. So I want to lump 2 questions together, and I kind of see these 2 questions as being kind of Hindu dharma throughout our life cycle. So one of our audience members is asking that, some of the other, some religions have their own schools. So pre-K through high school, should Hindus consider opening schools as well? And the second question is, someone saying that I think we do a great job in K through 12, but once people go to college, there seems to be a disconnect. Similarly, young professionals don't seem to be getting reached. So I think, would love to get people's thoughts on that. And I think we'll start with Shuchitaji, if you don't mind.
Sure, and I'll answer the second question first. How to get young people involved. I think when we expect the sevaks to know exactly what to do when, and you need to make this garland of these flowers and you can't use those flowers, and there's all of these restrictions and things like that, it makes it difficult for a young person to feel like comfortable, right? It's like, no, I don't want to bring Naivedyam because I don't know the rules. I don't want to help with the puja because I don't know enough, right? I think this is where, for us, it's been so helpful to say, hey, tell us what you're interested in and what you're good at, right? Tell us what you want to learn about. And if it's marketing, we have a marketing team for the temple, right? You can still serve in a way that you're comfortable and confident. If you love cooking, then you can stick with the Naivedyam. And here are a couple of guidelines to follow that aren't going to make you like fly to India to get the recipe. It's something you can do here, right? So take what their strengths are and allow them to contribute in a way that they love to. We had one girl, beautiful artist, and so she would do rangoli for us before every utsava, and that's all. She would come super early in the morning, do the rangoli and go home, and that was her thing, right? And some people love to chant, so they would come for that part, and it's fun to see all age groups at the temple, right? That's the beauty of it. When you see young kids running around, you have, young professionals coming back, and we have study groups. We have study groups for young professionals. There's an online class I teach for Texas A&M kids, Rice kids, Rice University, St. Mary's, and then I visit University of Austin, University of Texas in Austin every week, and we have study groups there. And through that, they come to celebrations. And I remember, hey, you are actually studying accounting. Do you think you can help with some finance stuff for our temple, right? Make them feel comfortable. Just it's common sense to do that when somebody comes to our home, right? Like, are you comfortable? In the same way, don't make them feel othered inside of a temple because they should feel comfortable. They should feel like it's their home. So we've seen a lot of young professionals and college kids come willingly, because even for Shivratri, they're like, I know how to wash dishes. So then we have all these kalashas. We have about 50 kalashas, and these kids wash all the kalashas, bring it back. They pack all of the food in an impeccable way to give, to all of the devotees. So find their talents and involve them in that way. Now, when it comes to school, like all the other religious-based schools, if there are enough people willing to do that work, I think it's an excellent idea. We have Chinmaya Vidyalayas all over India, dozens of them, and there's one in Trinidad as well. And that school is based off of Hindu values, but it serves people of all religions, right? They come there. There's people of all religions, all backgrounds to learn from there. So we should be open to anybody who wants to study. And it does, I think Bhaktiji says minority. We have to keep that in mind when we talk about opening up a school. We are a minority. The path for us is going to be more difficult than it is for others. But if there are enough committed Sanatanis willing to do it, I think it's an excellent idea, because when we have Balavihar, it's 1 hour out of their whole week. The Monday through Friday and even Saturday with extracurriculars, they're constantly bombarded with why are you doing this? Even teachers teaching them things about Sanatana Dharma that's false. And they come back to me and they say, hey, I took world history AP, and the only thing they talk about is caste and poverty and all of this, this patriarchal society. Is it true? And then I only have limited time to talk to them about these things. So the false information and sources are overpowering the right information and the truth. So if you have a school for Hindus to be able to learn about how to be a better servant to society, right? It's not just about being a better Hindu. When you're a better Hindu, you're a better person. You're a better sevak. And your worldview is so all-encompassing, right? So I love the idea. If there's enough people, I think it's excellent.
Thank you so much, Brahmacharya ji. Shrey, would you also like to take an answer for these?
Yeah, absolutely. And I particularly want to just talk about the college question, right? I think a lot of the worries and fears that parents have when sending their kids to college is that, man, they're going to be exposed to so many things. I can't force them to come on Sundays anymore to the temple, right? I can't tell them to do these things. They may choose to do other things. They may lose connection, right? All of these fears. And some of the comments are absolutely great, right? Being able to have the idea of having free transportation from universities to temples would be amazing, right? I think that would be so helpful to keep them committed, and even continue their kind of connection with the temple. But what I think is more important is finding a way for someone to build that connection with those youth, with those individuals on a college campus in a different context, right? So what I mean by that is, when kids are in college, it's a whole new environment, right? They're on campus, they're exposed to many different things, but having them come to the temple isn't the only way to keep them connected. It's by keeping the relationships alive, right? So similarly to what Shuchitaji said, we have discussion groups on campus where we'll talk about the same kinds of ideas, values, and topics related to our culture, but we see it from a different perspective, maybe a little bit more global, tailored to young adults. And we'll have these discussions where we want to the main idea is to keep someone who's leading this discussion be in the same age range, right? So that people don't feel judged, people feel like they can maintain a good relationship and that they can relate to the people in the entire group. And so, we've been having great discussions on a weekly level, talking about topics like why we celebrate certain festivals, who are historical figures that have done great work around the world, debates on contemporary issues. But what's most important during that phase of life is to maintain the relationships that you built with the community group through the temple. Because without that, I think that is the time frame where afterwards you see friends and groups move to different parts of the country or different world, and it's harder to keep that kind of connection alive. And so if those relationships are intact, I think that is the main purpose and the main solution to kind of keeping the interest and making sure that there's still curiosity and love for our culture.
Great. Do any of the other panelists want to jump in on this question, or can we go ahead with our last one?
I think let's go with the last one.
Okay, sounds great. So we are almost out of time, so I will ask our last set of questions. And I think the last set of questions kind of revolve around kind of being a Hindu in America, or in a different setting, like how to be Hindu in the West. So one of the questions is, right now we have a significant number of born Hindus who participate in temple activities. How do we reach out to local communities to engage and encourage weekly participation? And we also have a question about whether or not mandir should embrace dialogues with politicians, especially local politicians, to let them know about Hindus and Hindu phobia. So, Bhakti, would you like to go ahead and get started?
I'd like to kind of continue this along with the previous question. So, I'm going to throw the biggest cliche out there. Every gray cloud has a silver lining or something like that, right? Now, during COVID, horrible things have happened, but we've gotten so much out of it. Let's take advantage of the biggest skill we've all learned from COVID, which is virtual connections, right? If we're talking about engaging communities, we no longer have to think about the communities that's within a 30-mile range of a temple. There are so many people out there holding classes, holding courses. We talk about building schools. Let's start just at our temples. Or can we offer evening classes? Every evening there's a different class on a different topic. Guess what? It's virtual. You don't even have to drive to the temple. All of a sudden, you're opening your audience up to college students, working professional, young parents, elderly who cannot drive, anyone who's disabled. We remove the obstacle of accessibility, right? So right there in itself, we have an advantage. Second, maybe there's a temple out there who's holding a class. We can collaborate and sponsor the class. All of a sudden, we don't need to find resources. We're just working with another organization. So we have these great advantages that to us never even existed 2 years ago. So talk about unknown territory. We're hitting a big one now. So how can we take advantage of that, right? If there's a temple holding a class for teenagers on a Thursday, well, why do we need to hold a separate one? Let's ask them, can we get joined in with yours? Can we offer a hybrid format? Can we offer virtual resources? And that, in its way, is now the newer generation, the people who are working professionals nowadays. If someone tells me to go into my office 5 days a week, I will say, no, thank you. I'd rather find a new job. So why do we expect the same from our temples? Why can't we open up that perspective into this makes us global. We're no longer limited to the community who's just located physically around the temple. And another thing, I'd love to throw this idea out there at one of these conferences where I've heard other people talk. A great idea I heard is let's associate social causes to our teachings. So for example, during Navratri, every day should be focused on helping an organization that helps women. During Holi, let's find and help an organization that helps children in need, right? So every one of our festivals has a different story associated with it. What we can do is convert that into practical application and connect with the whole worldwide community. This isn't just about Hindu teachings. So if I were to go, an organization says that Navratri celebration, all the funds are going for a women's domestic violence shelter, I would be like, oh, I'm going to give more to that. That's amazing. That's the power of Shakti. That's the power of Durga. Look at how we're relating that to our day-to-day life. So adjusting our teachings also immediately makes us more accessible to the entire generation of people who are growing up here, no matter what their age is, right? And that kind of falls in with same thing with politics and social awareness. Get involved with your local community. It's not just about being a politician. I'm on my town senior commission. I mean, I don't have a voting power in my town, but all of a sudden I'm the only non-white person there. So when I bring a perspective, no one's ever thought of it before. And just by saying a simple sentence, you can change someone's mindset in how ideas are developed, even for your local community. So it's not about going in and making an immediate change and changing the world overnight. That's not what we're doing. We're really just trickling the thoughts out, sharing our mindset, and just hoping someone is going to listen, because someone somewhere will, and we don't want to miss out on that opportunity.
Thank you so much, Bhakti. I think we are out of time unless anyone wants to share any quick thoughts on that question as well. All right. I think we are all set. And apologies to those of you who have asked questions that we were not able to get to. But thank you once again to the Hindu Heritage Month for hosting us. It's really lovely to see so many second generation, maybe third generation folks here, all this diversity. Also to see so much Shakti, especially during Navratri, and of course, Shrey for being here as well. But thank you once again to all of our panelists. Thank you, Bhakti, Bhalika, Shrey, and Brahmacharini Shuchita. And I'm so sorry for messing up your name so many times. But I want us to close off with a quick mantra. And then I will wish everyone a happy Navratri, happy Durga Puja, happy Golu, however you celebrate this time, you know. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.